So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we're going to be looking at a replay from an RP series which is ongoing. Now I don't believe this is the one which is running on the official Discord, but it is nonetheless another one that is happening, so we will be seeing a 3v3 where both teams are all using the same faction, and in this case it's going to be the Witch Realm of Angmar, as I'm sure you can see. As we're saying as well that Lawmaster Aethad over here did indeed send me this replay, so big thank you to him for supporting the channel going forwards. And the other team is of course going to be the Easterlings of Rune over here on this side of the river. Now this is going to be interesting because this is also going to be a river crossing battle, so most of the battle is going to be taking place right here in the middle on this ford. There will of course be a bit of back and forth between the various ranged units as well. Just a little bit of a preamble before we start. I personally, if I were attacking on a river crossing, there's no faction I would rather be than Angmar, especially in 0.96 with the Barrow-wights, which are obviously very slow, but in a river crossing like this, their speed isn't going to be of the utmost importance. Their tankiness, however, will be very, very useful. And just in general, Angmar have got a lot of good options for going through a very punishing engagement like this. Now, they will die just the same as any other faction if they pick their engagements poorly. If they just send everything forward, Rune are going to be able to use rangers and javelins and their very extensive amounts of AP to really punish them. And of course, as Angmar are orcs, they will have relatively low morale, especially at their lower end, so a lot of their troops could end up going routing. But even so, Rune, they are a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to the evil factions, so it'll be interesting to see how they deal with this. A little bit more of a focus around AP, which will certainly help them against some of the more elite Angmar troops with that rusted plate armour that Angmar are known for. But yeah, I'm not really sure geographically where this would be, or narratively how on earth Angmar and Rune came to be battling with one another. I know that this certainly would not be the Anduin, because of course that's geographically that would make even less sense. There is actually a little settlement in here in the back corner, but I highly doubt that Rune are going to want to retreat over here. They definitely want to use that choke point to their advantage, otherwise Angmar could end up washing over them. But let's start off with the forces of Angmar. Of course, I will be going through the armies relatively quickly because, again, it's 0.96.1, so there's only a limited amount I can really say about the armies and how they will interact with one another. But we have BMK Overlord of the Dark Cloud here, who he also, I think, was going to send me it, but Aethad sent me it anyway, so he let me know on Discord regardless. He's got some Goblin Trackers. He's also got some Snaga Stalkers, so again, the lower tier of Angmar troops. Cheap archers, of course, are very useful in 0.96.1 as always. And yeah, Angmar overall, their archer force is obviously one of the worst in the game. Certainly it will be in 0.97 as well, when the cheap archers are not quite the be-all and end-all of every skirmish fight. We also have some Angmar Marauders, some Angmar Halberds. Good to have some fodder in these armies, I think, because obviously it is going to be quite a punishing choke point engagement for both sides. Some Blackwatch Legion, very useful, of course, for pushing through the lines. They should be kept back for a while, I think. You know, held in reserve until the end when Rune's sort of stamina starts to run out. Catapult, obviously very useful in a choke point fight like this. Witch Realm Blackguard, and of course the Barrow-wights. Witch Realm Blackguard are very, very powerful infantry, of course. Trolls, both Trolls of Gundabad and Trolls of Angmar, and some Guardians of Carndoon back here as well, and that's pretty much it. There's probably more units hidden in the trees, however. Now we'll go through Aethad's army real quick, who he is front and centre of all of the Angmar forces. He's got the Goblin Trackers in place. He's also got a unit of Trolls himself, some Snaga Stalkers. The Barrow-wights obviously probably going to be the first ones into the fray across the river, because they will be very difficult for Rune to get rid of. More Goblin Trackers, of course, already mentioned the Catapult. And then he has gone for a little bit more quality overall with his infantry, some Blackwatch Legion. He has got a unit of Angmar Halberds, but he's also gone for a very extensive force of Guardians of Carndoon, which I very much approve of. And then he's got both Witch Realm units, the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard, in addition to some Witch Realm Pikemen over here. And then the final Angmar army we have is going to be played by Agalar Galudithon, who of course is going to also bring both Witch Realm units. He's gone for the Trolls of Angmar also, some Blackwatch Legion, and actually one of the units of Blackwatch Legion's got the armour upgrade. He's got some Barrow-wights naturally, Witch Realm Pikemen, Guardians of Carndoon. Looks like he's gone for a little bit more of a quality approach as well. He's got several units of Snaga, to be fair, but none of the Angmar Marauders, which could be really used to pad the line out if he had gone for less Guardians of Carndoon. Got a unit of Gundabad Guard as well, and a Ballista, which could be very, very handy for sniping out any defensive or any artillery pieces that Rune have on their side of the river. Speaking of which, let's quickly go through the runic army compositions. We have Inarius playing as the first runic army, couple of units of just standardy strong clansmen without any armour upgrades at all. Even without them, however, they are still one of the better militia units when it comes to fighting, so they will at least be able to beat stuff like Snaga and Goblins in melee, which Angmar have, but as soon as it comes down to fighting stuff like Guardians of Carndoon, they will be out of luck. Some Narim as well, so the actually more aggressive archer of the two of the similar price points. The Variag mercenaries are more common to see because they are more efficient, but still the Narim do have the style. Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, line of sight might be a bit of an issue for them. I've noticed time and time again with the Dragon's Wrath crossbows it's incredibly difficult to actually get them to fire if there are any of your units in the close, sort of in the way. But if they can get into the right position, they could be devastating, as could, of course, the Carmel's Shadow Bows and the Balchel Sapphire Bladesmen. Very, very potent javelins and very, very potent rangers. Some Eastron Crossbowmen as well, some Carmel's Chosen. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, an interesting choice. They do have their little naft projectiles, which they can throw in, and also a very high skill level, even if they don't have many men in the unit, and they are pretty fragile outside of their defensive skill. Scion Rim, very heavy spears, very, very nice. For just sort of holding your front line together. The Gamp Rim, of course, the AP, and the Phalanx is going to be very, very important for Rune if they're going to have victory here, I think. Then some Flag Rim, and also some Eastron Guard. Considering the lack of cavalry on this map, I think the Eastron Guard, it's not really necessary to bring them. You probably would have been better off with the cheaper Eastron Warriors. But even so, that is their primary focus most of the time, to sort of guard your backlines against marauding cavalry, because as a two-handed spear unit, they can be very, very effective against cavalry indeed. Now we have Blindness playing as the second Rune army, who's facing down Eothad right here on the choke point. He's got some crossbowmen on either side. They are in a little bit of danger of being skirmished down right from the beginning, but even so, they will be able to get some nice crossfire into the river. Some upgraded Eastron clansmen holding down the front line. They won't be a match for Barrow Whites, but still. Here are the Variag mercenaries as well, so this is the most commonly seen Runic Archer, I think, in 0.96.1, because they are the most efficient. They have a shield value, they're tankier than the Narim, and they don't really have that much less in terms of damage. And also I think there are more of them per unit, although that might be very, very similar actually, I'm not so sure. But even so, the Variag mercenaries are definitely the more efficient of the two units in 0.96. That will change in 0.97 though, I know that for a fact. They will be very different in terms of their function. Gamp Rim and Flag Rim, obviously the classic Runic front line, and then we also have some Balchos Drisman and the Carmel's Chosen here at the back to really act as the elite unit in this army. And then the final army on the field today, the third and final Runic army, we have FP Susa 12, Gamp Rim again, Eastron Hunters, obviously the cheapest of the Runic archers, which means that they are arguably even more efficient than the Variag mercenaries. You know, that is the reality of things in 0.96.1. Gamp Rim, obviously the Halberds once again, Scion Rim, Heavy Spears, Carmel's Chosen once more, Nar Rim, very similar look to all of these Runic armies, going very much for the Golden Boy approach. Dragon's Wrath Crossman as well, Balchos Rifle and Eastron Crossman. Not too surprising though, the Golden Legions of Rune with their AP focus are going to be the way to go against Angmar in particular. So, without further ado, let's begin. So this is going to be kind of a static fight in many ways, but I would imagine it's going to be a lot of back and forth. If Angmar commit forward too quickly, too soon, they will find themselves taking an awful lot of damage from the Runic skirmishers and armor-piercing infantry. Goblin Trackers are still hiding. You can see actually that Angmar are going to move all of their forces and consolidate into the middle, but here we go. The artillery is going to open up, and Rune actually don't have any artillery, which certainly means that the aggressor is going to have to be Angmar here. Rune cannot afford to try and charge across the river into the guts of that Angmar army if there are two catapults and a ballista ready to kill them off, but neither can they afford to retreat too far away from the choke point itself, because Angmar, they will have the presence if they can pour across the river to overwhelm the Runic lines if they're not organised, and this is exactly what they're in danger of doing here. I almost feel as though Eothad should start moving forward immediately here, because this catapult clearly has blindness a little bit worried. He's pulled his Gamp Rim a little bit further back from the front line, and that Phalanx could be incredibly important for holding down the Angmar advance. More bombardment happening, not any hugely telling blows. I mean, the catapult has certainly gotten some good hits, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as if they've carved into an entire unit and made it useless yet. You can see that Susa 12 and Denarius are moving their reinforcements into position, so still a bit of a skirmish phase going on here, and honestly, this is a good thing for Angmar, because Rune really don't have anything in answer to this. The catapults will be able to sort of bombard the enemy unmolested, and we'll see what Angmar decides to do, because I do think the onus, considering the army compositions, is on Angmar to move forward. It would be suicide for Rune to try and cross the river with those two catapults there, because the blobs would form. The Barrow Whites would be able to pin Rune in place for extended periods of time. They would not be able to push through the lines, especially not against a numerically superior force like Angmar is. And then those catapults would just send the vast majority of the Easterlings running for the hills. still these strong clansmen right here on the front line. Taking a few losses, but nothing too serious. I mean, it is possible, I suppose, that Angmar are trying to sort of draw Rune across the river quickly by having all of these units hidden, but I mean, I highly doubt these players are going to fall for that. I mean, it's very obvious that Angmar do have units that can hide. I mean, the Snaga are not particularly scary, but it's a given that they are here. But the Barrow Wights are the main thing. Anyone who's played the game before knows that Angmar has access to the Barrow Wights and the fact that they can hide, so it's very clear what Eothad is doing. He also has those archers, which are also hidden, so I suppose from the runic perspective it kind of looks like the only thing they have here is the catapult, and this infantry is a little bit further back, but it doesn't look like Rune are going to fall for that, which is good. You can see here that the Gamprim are moving forward once again, so the Phalanx is going to get into place, this sort of V shape. They're in loose formation at the moment to try and mitigate some of that catapult damage. Interestingly cautious so far. I mean, at some point someone's going to have to commit themselves forward, and I do believe the onus is on Angmar, like I said before. So they're going to have to move forward at some point. In fact, I will make a little cut here because it's very clear that the two armies are just sort of maneuvering around and sort of waiting for someone to make the first move. So I will make a cut until someone makes that first move. Okay, so that didn't take as long as I was fearing, but it is still going to be a predominantly skirmish-focused opening phase by the looks of things, with the Variag mercenaries starting to open up on the enemies as they move forward. So the Barrow Wights have now revealed themselves, the Snaga Stalkers slowly marching into place, the Goblin Trackers, I think, we're going to try and move out into the river to try and skirmish down with Rune, but I don't really think anyone would achieve too much of an advantage by doing that. It's possible Angmar were trying to get a few kills on the Gamprim, if anything. Ooh, and there's a unit of Gamprim which is actually fairly tightly packed, and that catapult is going to go for them, killing off a few of the crossbowmen as well. I think those Gamprim will spread out into loose formation. I think the Snaga are going to be the first to cross the river, but Eothad should probably send up some support with them. If the Snaga do move forward on their own, they're not going to make any sort of progress at all, really. Again, another grazing hit from the catapult. These kills are starting to add up, even if, you know, to take away the full effectiveness of a crossbow unit, you kind of need to kill off more than half of it quite quickly. These crossbows will still be in a good enough shape to fight, certainly. What have we got here? Well, it does look as though the Snaga are actually taking some ranged fire, and I think Angmar will be all too happy to see this. Oh, excuse me. One thing that Rune can certainly claim an advantage on in comparison to Angmar is their much more varied and much more powerful skirmish line. And to see Rune pouring in their valuable arrows into just a unit of Snaga Stalkers, which have clearly been sent forward with the express purpose of absorbing some arrow fire, that will suit Angmar down to the ground, really. There's some Snaga archers moving forward from Agalar. But I would say that these Snaga Stalkers are a little bit too far away from any sort of support, so it might be worth Blindness's time to sort of commit these Eastron Clansmen forward. The Eastron Clansmen certainly a far superior unit to the Snaga Stalkers, especially with both levels of armour upgrade. Makes them by far and away the best at fighting infantry of any militia tier unit in the game. Indeed, with their armour upgrades, they don't really look like a militia tier unit. Having that old Swiftblade model. Taking a little bit of damage, however, and it is worth saying that even with the armour upgrades and these shields, they are still a militia unit at heart, so a bit of focused arrow fire will still be enough to do a decent amount of damage to them, even as low tier as the Goblin Trackers and Snaga Archers may be. Rune are a little bit spread out, so again, this mainly comes down to the fact that they're a little bit wary of the Angmar artillery, I would imagine. Angmar, meanwhile, very content to just let their archers do their thing. And indeed, I think some of the archers are going for the Gamprim, which is a target, if they are in range of them, they should absolutely go for. The Gamprim do have a very minor shield value. Any unit that has a shield on its back does have that. A shield value of 2 or 3 is the standard, but even so, it's not going to save them too much if they're under sustained arrow fire over a long period of time, even again by lower tier archers such as this. Snaga Stalkers are slowly sort of wading through the river. Uncharacteristically cautious from an Angmar army, I must say, so far. But they are still plugging away, getting a few kills on the runic line, softening them up for the main assault, I would imagine. Snaga Stalkers just sort of threatening the front line, but Rune will not be moved. And it's good that Rune aren't falling for the bait ultimately, because if they do, then the catapults will tear them to shreds. The Gamphrim just sort of spreading out again. You can see that there has been a decent amount of damage done, however. The Goblin trackers on the far side of the river certainly earning their keep. But for the most part, I think now the only unit they're in range of is the Eastron Clansmen, but they'll still take whatever they can get in terms of kills. No, they are still in range of the Gamphrim, amusingly enough. So again, the golden scale mail and the shields mounted on the back do mean the Gamphrim are not completely defenceless when they come under arrow fire like some low tier pikes are, but it's still certainly not the sort of thing that they are designed for. Well, what do we got over here? Some Barrow-wights moving forward from Hagalar. We also have, well, there's a lot of Barrow-wights actually, some archers getting a little bit closer to the action as well. So the Barrow-wights are going to very slowly but surely make their way across the river. The Snaga are still just very slowly making their way forwards, but now they're across the river, we are going to receive our first melee engagement between the Eastron Clansmen and the Snaga Stalkers. The Snaga Stalkers also fighting slightly uphill after wading through the river. I would imagine the Eastron Clansmen are going to be absolutely fine in this engagement. It's not the sort of, the Snaga are very poor in melee. They're not as poor as something like Orc Fodder, because they don't have the Spear Malice also acting against them, but they're still not good, and the morale is also a real problem. Yeah, defeat seems certain. The Barrow-wights are also so slow that it's quite likely that the Snaga Stalkers will start to waver and break. You can also see here, amusingly enough, the Goblin trackers, the archers across the river, they're so inaccurate that they're hitting their own men as much as they are the runic forces. I mean, fortunately for them, the Eastron Clansmen do actually cost money, unlike the Snaga Stalkers. And here comes the second catapult now starting to open up, trying to put some more pressure on the runic line. Now, one problem Rune do have is they do need to defend this choke point, but if they do move forward, those catapults are going to have a very good shot. I'm actually very surprised that Rune did not bring any artillery at all. Just on a river crossing, at least a ballista is always a good idea. Angmar came very well prepared in those terms. See, there are some fire arrows being loosed, another unit of Snaga Stalkers being sent across, this time by Agalar, as well as all of his Barrow-wights as well. So you can see that the floodgates are starting to open now as Angmar starts to march across the river, and as more and more men approach the front line, it's going to take more than just this very beleaguered unit of Eastron Clansmen to hold the choke point. And as I said before, Rune do need to hold the choke point in spite of the risks, because if they lose it, Angmar can pour forward, and with their superior, certainly in terms of their melee strength that they have brought, Rune are going to be much more dependent on their skirmishers, their javelins, their crossbows. That's going to be the key for victory for them. These strong crossbowmen are now firing. Cummel's Shadow Guard being committed forward early. Perhaps not the best use of the Shadow Guard. The Shadow Guard, of course, like a lot of the runic forces, are AP. They are shock infantry as well, so they're not exactly the most durable unit. More lightly armoured. You can see from the sort of cloaks and the more limited amount of scale mail that they actually wear, that they are not really designed for a long fight. Also, now you can see these strong clansmen are routing off now. Sousa sending forward his Shadow Guard, but the Shadow Guard also immediately coming under fire from the numerous archer companies that Angmar have in position. But you can see now that Rune, there's a lot of arrows flying backwards and forwards, both from the Angmar and the runic side of the river. The problem is, however, a lot of the runic archers are trying to kill off the Barrow-wights, but they're going to need a lot of concentrated fire, I think, from the crossbows and the rangers in order to achieve the desired effect. Rune are also falling into the trap of only committing forward singular units. Now, this might not be such a bad thing. I think those were javelins we saw just then. Regardless, under normal circumstances, this might actually work, sort of allowing the troops to blob up on just a single unit of yours while you shoot them with archers and crossbows and javelins, but in this case I'm not so sure, because the archers are simply not going to be able to kill off the Barrow-wights quickly enough. And these Shadow Guard are already getting chewed up, mostly I think by the fact that Angmar are targeting them down with archers. Like, you can't really expect Snaga Stalkers to be a match for a unit like the Shadow Guard in melee. But it doesn't matter, overwhelming force is how Angmar are dealing with this, and there's a huge amount of arrows just shooting back and forth. You can also see that the Gamphrim forming up a decent front line, the Eastron Clansmen getting a little bit closer to the action. Fire arrows being used, but I mean, the fire arrows, considering the volume that they're in, might be enough to break off these units of Snaga, but the Barrow-wights are here to stay. The only way to kill them off is to grind them down in melee or shoot them with something suitably powerful at range. And there's the ballista firing his back, going after the Carmel's Chosen, trying to assassinate the general. Fortunately for Inarius and Blindness, he has so far missed the targets he's going after, but you can see here the horde that Angmar is sending across the river, so far entirely made up of Snaga and the Barrow-wights. There are a few Gundabad Guard moving forward as well, so it's not as if they're not sending forward any sort of higher tier regular infantry. The Barrow-wights are a little bit more of a specialty unit. Here come the fire arrows once again. Over a longer period of time, these fire arrows will start to have an impact. You can see here the Gamprim, they're in their phalanx formation getting ready to hold the line, but they're going to need more reinforcements than this. Angmar are one of the best factions, if not the best faction, at breaking through lines like this if they're too thin and flimsy, and that's exactly what I fear is going to happen here. A lot of this arrow support is moving in. The Snaga Stalkers, of course, won't be able to make too many inroads against this Gamprim front line themselves. When the Barrow-wights come forward, and when the Gundabad Guard come forward, they can slap themselves into shield wall and start pushing through, especially this unit over here, which is looking very, very depleted. Those Angmar skirmishers have certainly done a decent job at weakening the Rune front line for the initial assault. More reinforcements are going to be needed, and they're a little bit too far away. I feel as though Rune, they do need to get their reinforcements on hand. Snaga Stalker's defeat seems certain. Runic Halberds in formation. Having a section of barrel as your shield is not going to help you against professional soldiers, as still the arrow fire comes in, and at this point I would imagine that we're probably going to start to see quite a few of the Barrow-wights start to drop. I mean, a lot of this is still just Variag mercenaries and Eastron hunters firing in, but it is still going to take its toll over a long period of time, and when the Barrow-wights lose all of their hit points, they are not very good at all. Goblin Trackers are still firing. You can see there the Baltroth Tribesmen. Baltroth Tribesmen, they're doing a good job, but unfortunately the Ballista shooting right along the lines, and you can see there, I believe this is a side effect of the Barrow-wights having very low mass. The fact that, you know, just a basic unit of javelins can send them flying with every volley. It also means that you can't just use the Barrow-wights to push through lines, otherwise it would be heavily abusable in .96, but Barrow-wights coming forward, but they are going to start to take losses now, and if those javelins keep up the fire, the Barrow-wights will also find it difficult to actually move into a position where they can engage. But this unit of Baltroth Tribesmen is getting absolutely massacred by that Ballista. They need to get into loose formation. They're also being shot from across the river, and in the river actually, by some of these Goblin Trackers. So certainly going after the high damage targets here, Angmar. There's actually a lot of dead bodies in the river. A lot of dead orc bodies as well, so this water's going to be spoiled for quite some time. Goblin Trackers that are out of ammunition, Angmar Marauders coming forward, more Snaga Stalkers, some Snaga Archers moving into position as well, so Angmar have got a lot of meat for the grinder here. Certainly more so than Rune, but Rune have been giving as good as they get, but Rune need to send in more reinforcements for this front line. They're getting some friendly fire. Well, you can see there, oof, that's a very, very nice shot there. The Ballista shooting right down the line of these Gamprim, doing a huge amount of damage there. Yeah, and I think the reinforcements are coming forward now, but it's only a basic unit of Eastron Clansmen. Rune need to be a little bit more... They need to be braver here with what they're committing forward to the front line. Angmar have come forward in force. I mean, if I were Rune, I would be thinking right now, if I can stop this advance from all of these Barrow-wights, we're in a really good position to go on to win this fight. And they've done a good job at shooting the Barrow-wights and weakening them from afar, but their front line is on the verge of collapse, and if that happens, Angmar will be able to pour forward, they'll be able to get into all of these squishy skirmishers, and that will be gain. If Rune can't defend their skirmishers, Angmar's brute strength in melee that they have brought is going to be too much for the Golden Boys. There's another unit of Eastron Clansmen coming down now. You can see the Goblin Trackers trying to push their way through the lines. They're using their low tier trash to try and force their way through these already depleted companies of Gamprim. The Clansmen are going to try and shore up the line, which they will be able to against Snaga Stalkers and Goblin Trackers at least. But you can see now, Goblin Trackers, I mean those are Angmar Marauders in there. There's also the Gundabad Guard, which they look to be in shield wall. If they were to push forward now, especially over here, I mean look at this. Very, very depleted unit of Gamprim. They do have units in reserve, and I'm not sure it's enough. And here we go. The Angmar Marauders are trying to push through the line, and they are succeeding. Unlike the Barrow-wights, after all, they do have some mass, and unlike the Goblin Trackers, they are actually a unit of infantry, so they're not completely helpless. Victory seems certain for the Angmar Marauders. Rune sending forward some more reinforcements now. The Eastron Guard coming forth. What have we got over here? Looks like the Baltrog tribesmen, they are out of ammunition. They pulled out their sort of short swords and their hatchets. So possibly they're going to be committed to melee as well, their little karambit knives. I mean, more is needed here from Rune. They're doing a lot of damage, and under normal circumstances I would say this has actually gone alright for Rune, but the presence of the Barrow-wights means that this Angmar attack is not going to fall apart quickly. Which means you do need more reinforcements to hold Angmar in place for longer. If you're able to do that, then you're in a pretty good place. There's these strong crossbows trying to do the business as well. I mean, of course they can scarcely miss. They're going to hit Angmar forces regardless of what they do. Over here you can see that the Variag mercenaries out of ammunition, pulling out their axes and shields, charging into melee. Over here, with the addition of the Eastron Guard clansmen and now the Variag mercenaries, they do have enough men in the way to at least give pause to this attack. There's also some Dragon's Wrath guildsmen over here who are using their little naft projectiles to fire in, and I'm not sure if they hit whether it's an instant kill or not. It's kind of difficult to tell because there's so many projectiles, there's so many men, it's hard to tell what's actually hitting and what's not. But regardless, more ranged pressure. There is of course a danger that if Angmar do end up losing, oh that was a nasty hit there, into the guts of some Gamprim and the Baltrog tribesmen, that ballista has been doing a very good job as well. Very good pick from Agalar. In a river crossing battle like this, a ballista is always a wise investment. Whether it's to try and snipe out enemy siege or whether it's to do what Agalar has done here, shoot right along defensive formations. Dragon's Wrath guildsmen taking a few hits from the catapult. More Gamprim moving forward, the Variag mercenaries getting in there. The Eastron Guard are actually already routing. That's a sign of how dire things are actually getting on the front line for Rune. The Barrow-wights, of course, they cause fear. For good reason, they're wraiths. The undead. And the runic front line is so thin, and there isn't enough reinforcements here, and there's not enough elite troops here. Some Scion Rim to help inspire the front line would be just what is needed for Rune to counteract the fear effect the Barrow-wights give. Bit of unfortunate friendly fire there into the Barrow-wights. But as I was saying, Angmar could end up paying the price for this. If the Barrow-wights do end up dying off, then things could get a little grisly for them. Baltrog tribesmen firing there into the guts of this assault. The Gundabad Guard, they have actually taken a lot of damage. Presumably that comes down mostly to the skirmishers. Variag mercenaries here. Gamprim moving into place. The Eastron Crossmen are in a good place. I mean, the runic skirmish positions have been very good throughout this entire game. And under normal circumstances this would have devastated an assault, but the Barrow-wights are a bit of an outlier. And they've certainly allowed Angmar to keep this assault going longer than it otherwise would. Gamprim are here, poking and prodding, and this is one of the reasons why I said that onus was definitely on Angmar to be the aggressive ones here. It's what their faction is all about, but also in 0.96.1 the Barrow-wights, especially in a setting like this, are ideal. And it's certainly a big advantage that Angmar can press home. You can see here the Snaga Stalkers trying to get around the side and start wrapping up the line. It's kind of difficult to keep track of a battle like this to see what's going on where. But they definitely need to stop this from happening, because the only thing keeping this front line together at the moment is a flimsy unit of Variag mercenaries, and if they start getting attacked in the rear that won't last much longer. This Gamprim taking some direct catapult shots, the Nar Rim coming into position with their scimitars drawn. Some Scion Rim are moving into place now, as well as some Flag Rim on the other side, so Rune are still holding to give them their dues, but there's still a lot of Barrow-wights left alive, and more Angmar reinforcements are pouring across the river, and in places they're starting to push Rune back. It's only Snaga so far, but if they keep sending Barrow-wights forward they'll be able to reinforce that position. You can see that there's some Angmar halberds moving forward as well, slap them into phalanx. That's something else for Rune to think about. Variag mercenaries are here. Still a fairly long way to go in this fight. We're almost up to the halfway point, to be fair. And actually it might be a good idea to actually see percentage of kills. Well, I mean, technically speaking, Angmar have lost 3% more, but it is also worth saying that Rune, of course, have got a far higher percentage of their army being skirmishers. So as soon as they're all out of ammunition, the Angmar manpower will mean slightly more in melee. But so far, Rune still have enough skirmish ammunition to cause Angmar some problems in their archers, crossbows and javelins, doing a very, very nice job so far of whittling down the Angmar assault. Still a lot of Barrow-wights, but anything that's coming forward with the Barrow-wights, be it Snaga or Gundabad Guard or Angmar Marauders and Halberds, have all died off pretty quickly. You can see there the Snaga Stalk is actually routing in the face of the Golden Legionnaires. Excuse me. Barrow-wights are still fighting hard though, and that is the problem. I mean, so many Barrow-wights are still here. I don't know if there's any more across the river that can come in as reinforcements. But Rune trying their best. Meanwhile, over here, you can see that the Baltroth Trident are routing off. Once again, I think that's a result of the Ballista. The Ballista is in a perfect position here to shoot right along the runic formation. And that's probably why Rune are a little bit more reluctant to engage over here, which is very understandable. Yeah, the announcer seems to fancy Angmar's chances. The Gamprim slowly shuffling their way into position. The Eastron Guard looks like they did return from routing, at the very least, to once again engage with the Barrow-wights in glorious melee. And with the Scion Rim nearby, I believe the Scion Rim inspire nearby units. They certainly do in .97. Snaga archers coming forward, engaging in melee, but they are engaging against Flag Rim. The Flag Rim will easily send Snaga archers packing, although also going after the Eastron crossbows. They might be out of ammunition at this point. I would imagine they are if they're being sent forward into melee, but even so, a real wet noodle fight. The Flag Rim will certainly be enough to tilt the balance of that power in Rune's favour though. These Eastron crossbows are still firing away, cranking those crossbows and shooting into the flank. What are they actually going for? Oh no, I think they're going for the Snaga archers. That's a horrible waste. Horrible waste of ammunition. You really need to be trying to wear down these Barrow-wights slightly more. Anything but the Snaga archers would be better though. Meanwhile, you can see here the Halberds on the front line shaken. Angmar, of course, losing a bit of stomach for the fight in terms of some of their lower tier units at the very least. The Runic, the Legions holding a little firmer now that the Scion Rim are on the front line. More professional units, and it does look as though those orcs did just rout. They did indeed. The Barrow-wights are still holding firm, but Rune are actually pushing back now, and Angmar are in a little bit of danger here of not committing forward enough units to support the Barrow-wights to press home their advantage. They need more elite troops on the front line. I would say get the Guardians of Khan Doom forward. Give a more well-rounded and very survivable look to this front line. And also, when the line looks like it's about to break in one place, have a unit of Blackwatch Legion on standby so you can push through.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Those Goblin Trackers, they're not designed for this sort of melee fighting, so they routed in amongst their Barrow-wight allies. Angmar Halberds have moved forward, but this is kind of what I mean. So far, the only support the Barrow-wights have really had, the only stronger unit that's come forward with them was one unit of Gundabad Guard. They need a little bit more in my opinion. And there's still these crossbows up on the hill, there's still the archers, there's still the javelins doing a good job at pinning Angmar in place. There's a little bit more movement across the river now potentially from Angmar. Here however come some more of the shadow units. The shadow bows and another unit of shadow guard. More fire arrows coming in, which is certainly not helping the morale situation in here for Angmar. In fact, those Angmar Halberds have already broken. You can see that the Barrow-wights, the only things which haven't broken quite quickly here. Here comes the catapult once again. Again, decent hit here into the heart of the Eastron crossbows. Decent bunch of hits. They're all in loose formation, but even so, all of them at least connected. There's a lot of fire arrows flowing back and forth. There's a lot of reinforcements still from Rune that can be... well, I say lot. There's a decent amount of reinforcements in terms of their infantry, but they still have to deal with the more elite Angmar infantry units like the Trolls, which are infantry of a sort, but also the Witch Realm units, the Guardians of Khan Doom, and they still haven't managed to kill off all of the Barrow-wights, so there's no reason for Angmar to panic that Rune are actually pushing back, but they do need to commit forward some more elite units, I think, Angmar, to really press home their advantage.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
Barrow-wights continuing to just try and grind down the enemy. A lot of them just wielding little daggers and wooden sticks and hatchets. They don't do damage very quickly, the Barrow-wights, which is another potential issue that they're facing here. The Barrow-wights' damage is very, very low. Their entire purpose for being is essentially to engage in melee and cause a bit of fear. and survive for a long time. But they are not the damage dealers. They need something which can deal a little bit more damage, I think. Potentially some Guardians of Carn coming forward now. Only a single unit, but still. Something which has certainly been dealing damage is that Angmar Ballista, which has done an awful lot of damage so far. Some Shadow Guard getting into the side here, a very nice hit there from the Angmar Catapult. Of course, having 3 artillery pieces when your enemy has none is a very big advantage that Angmar are also trying to press home. Even if all of the runic archers and javelins and crossbows have made their life a little bit more difficult. Camel's Shadow Guard getting into the side of the Barrow-wights now, and the Barrow-wights are starting to struggle a little bit, I think. I mean, they're getting a bit of friendly fire here and there from their own artillery as well. They're trying to push through now, but I don't think that's going to work. I think that's going to play right into Rune's hands. Some Guardians of Carn are moving forward now. It's been a very bloody fight, and it's getting bloodier all the time. The Gamprim have done a very good job. The initial companies of Gamprim weren't really supported properly, and they did get overwhelmed. But the second line has held up very, very nicely. And Rune are starting to really close the jaws on the Angmar position. These Camel's Shadow Guard are probably bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. They're charging right in here. It's a bit of a brawl at this point, actually. It's not really... The runic army does have sort of dedicated lines, but in and amongst the Barrow-wights, there are Shadow Guard, there are runic infantrymen, Flag Rim. Forward come the Guardians of Carn to try and restore a bit of order to the Angmar assault. Again, one problem with all of the runic units being right in and amongst the Barrow-wights is the fact that while the siege is getting a decent amount of kills, there's a lot of friendly fire coming from the catapults and the ballista, and honestly, Rune would probably prefer that. They prefer that these Barrow-wights just get killed as quickly as possible. Again, just putting a lot of pressure here on the Angmar front line. Gamprim victory seems certain. Slowly but surely Rune gaining the upper hand. Looks like another unit of Guardians of Carn is on its way across the river. And they are sorely needed. The Guardians of Carn are very strong. Although that's a lot of friendly fire they just suffered. Rune, of course, are taking damage from all of this as well, but they will at least be pleased that some of that ammunition has helped them as well as hindered them. The Flag Rim are actually routing now, so the catapult's starting to have more of a negative impact. Guardians of Carn as far as line infantry goes, are very effective, of course, but Flag Rim are AP, so you would give the edge to the runic unit in melee if both were full health and both were fighting in a vacuum. As it is, though, it's not quite that simple. So yeah, that side of the runic sort of push has actually been stopped by Angmar, that siege doing enough morale damage to give them a little bit more breathing space. But forward come Rune once again, the Lok Sion Rim coming forward, being supported by the Nafatoons of the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. It is only Sion Rim they're up against as well, but more and more reinforcements going forward. Out of ammunition, Eastron Crossmen, it's just more men to man the front line. More hits on the runic infantry. The Barrow-wights are still alive, which is a continuing problem for Rune. They're not really able to gain any sort of breathing space. Especially now with the Guardians of Carn moving across the river as well. The Barrow-wights are very depleted now, but still alive and fighting. That catapult is in a very nasty position. One good hit right along this line could be enough to effectively decide the battle, I think, because that's a lot of runic infantry which they need to keep holding the line. But Rune can't afford to disengage here. They might be able to afford to disengage at least with the Sion Rim. Or they could try and push further in, cause a little bit more friendly fire. Sion Rim now the ones responsible mostly for holding down the fort. There go the Nafts. Again, not hugely devastating. The catapult missing once again. Grazing hit, not quite what they're looking for. I mean, the Guardians of Carn are charging forward, they're shaken. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, though, they're no shrinking violets in melee. They've got a huge amount of defensive skill, and now another unit of Flag Rim are moving forward to add their AP to the mix as well. So I think this is where the Guardians of Carn assault comes to an end. There's another unit moving across the river, however. There's still plenty of reinforcements that both sides can commit forward potentially. Rotting meat, which is a sign that they're out of ammunition. But the rotting meat might be a good thing. Combined with the fear from the Barrow-wights, combined with the additional pressure on the runic line, that could be enough to cause more of a rout. though I kind of doubt it. They have very few low tier units actually on the front line now. Combination of Flagrim and Narum trying to push back against the still fighting Barrow-wights. The Barrow-wights have been fighting for a long time, but they have been pushed back, there's no doubt about that. The Baltroth Tribesmen using their javelins. The Guardians of Carndoon trying to make something happen. The Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen actually getting out of melee, presumably because they still have ammunition left. That shouldn't concern Rune too much though. The AP of the Flagrim, as I said, should be enough to give Rune the advantage in this engagement. Guardians of Carndoon are also fighting up an incline, so that should be enough also to drain their fatigue a little bit more quickly. Some Blackwatch Legion are moving across the river now. Now the runic line at this point is thin enough to the point where Blackwatch Legion, in addition to a sort of concerted effort by the trolls, could be enough to cause havoc in the runic backlines. But if they're going to do that, all three of the Angmar players need to commit to that. Coordinate well, because if they don't, then Rune will be able to isolate each one as they come forward. Barrow-wights are still alive, despite Rune's best efforts. Another unit of Guardians of Carndoon, the Baltroth Tribesmen, launching javelin volley after javelin volley into them, trying to weaken them as they come forward. Yeah, I think this is where Angmar are going to try and finish the game off. It's the final 10,000 frames, so it will be this. I think will be the deciding move one way or the other. The Carmel's shadow bows are ready and in position. All of this comes down to whether or not the runic skirmishers that are left, whether or not they're capable of doing the amount of damage they need to stop this Angmar assault. All the trolls are moving forward. Most of the runic infantry is going to come forward and engage. I think the Flagrim are moving forward. The Carmel's chosen. Angmar able to sort of squirm in behind the lines a little bit, although they're routing immediately. Pushed a little bit too far. The Carmel's chosen are coming in. I think, yeah, Carmel's shadow bows are shooting, so I'm a little bit worried to get in close to that engagement. Now you can see the sort of the green smoke from the rotting meat. There's a huge amount of trolls moving forward, in addition to the Barrow-wights that are already still there. But this is going to be it. I mean, if this assault fails for Angmar, they have a lot of strength coming forward, but if it does fail, they're in trouble. That was a shot from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. From this range, however, they're not really at their most effective with their sort of split shot flechette rounds. As far as a crossbow goes, I don't really think they work too well in 0.96.1. Not for what they cost anyway. You need to be right up next to someone. It's almost like a shotgun, really. Whereas in 0.97, when Lothlorian's Kindred of Celeborn have split shot arrows, they seem to work far better. Oh man, maybe I was wrong, because that was a huge amount of damage the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen just did. The Carmel's shadow bows are still shooting as well. The Baltroth Sapphire Bladesmen are going to try and shoot. This runic front line has been sort of smashed to splinters, but you can see there the damage that all of these runic skirmishers are doing. But unfortunately the trolls, they are very resilient to this sort of thing, and they will be able to weather the storm, I think, and shut down a lot of these runic skirmishers, giving the Angmar infantry the chance it needs to continue to make progress against the runic infantry, which is still alive down near the river. Getting into the Baltroth. The Sapphire Bladesmen can handle themselves in melee though. It says defeat seems certain, but they are very, very strong, and with support they should be able to kill off the trolls in melee. And I think that's what Susa 12 is going to be doing as he's moved forward a unit of Carmel's chosen, because Rune have to know that if they can't defend their skirmishers here, they're in real trouble. You only have to look at this engagement over here as Angmar start to pour through. The Blackwatch Legion, the trolls coming forward in full force. After the runic line was softened up after a long attrition-based campaign with the Barrow-wights and all of the lower tier units, now Angmar comes forward in full strength. Still some crossmen trying to do some damage as well. But this battle is certainly starting to take on a chaotic feel, which, as I always say, generally favours the orcs, and I think it will here. Still a lot of skirmishers sort of firing backwards and forwards, so the Carmel's chosen trying to kill off more of the trolls. A lot of the trolls have started to die as well, to be fair, but they've already done their job, I think. You can see over here that some of the upgraded Blackwatch Legion, actually, from Agalar, has managed to move forward and engage the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. I would actually give the edge to the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen in that fight if the trolls weren't there. There's a world of difference between them when it comes to their melee skill, but you can see here, yeah, look at that. Angmar have managed to break the runic defence on the front line. Rune do still have some units of Carmel's Shadow Guard coming in, trying to regain control of the situation. They still have skirmishers firing away as well from multiple angles. Dragon's Wrath Crossmen are out of ammunition now though. There's still some Scion Rim in the background as well, but they need to sort of regroup whatever infantry they have left and try and form up a cohesive front line for their skirmishers to do more damage. If they're unable to do that, I really worry for them. I worry for them already, to be quite frank. I mean, when you've got units like Witch Realm Blackguard and Hammer Guard coming forward in support of this big push by trolls, it's going to be very difficult to regain control of the situation. But, I mean, having said that, the Blackguard are going up against Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen in melee. The Shadow Guard are moving forward. There's a lot of numbers here, but Angmar still have reinforcements trickling in. Still some Hammer Guard across the river as well. The Catapult might be a bit of a dangerous thing to use from an Angmar perspective here, because it's all a bit of a brawl now. They could end up hitting their own men very, very easily. Orcs don't tend to do too well when they're having their morale shocked either. These Eastron crossbows look like they still have ammunition, and these trolls are one by one cutting off their heads. The trolls are in. They have taken a lot of losses from their exertions so far, but they've certainly done their job, because now the Angmar infantry is free to move forward. The Baltros Sapphire Bladesmen trying to do some damage. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen being committed to melee. Trolls and Blackwatch Legion fighting side by side. The Ballista Crew. The Ballista Crew's reward for a job well done is the fact that they have to go into melee against Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. Who'd be a soldier? Carmel's Chosen moving across to try and help out against the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, as are the Carmel's Shadow Bows. Over a long engagement, perhaps the Hammer Guard's stamina will let them down. They don't have quite the same defensive capabilities as the Blackguard after all, even if their attack is very, very scary to behold. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for them, you can see there's 2 units of Witch Realm Blackguard coming over here as well, so those Carmel's Chosen probably not going to be able to withstand this. So the Witch King of Angmar sort of flexing his dominance over Carmul. 2 of the Nazgul having a bit of infighting. It does look as though the Witch King is going to prove his dominion as head of the Nazguls. Or Nazgul, I should say. Trolls of Gundabad being shot point blank by the Rangers, but Trolls are not going to mind too much about Ranger fire. The body piercing doesn't really work out too well when the Trolls are so few in number and when they're more spaced out than regular units. The Scion Rim are trying to chase them down, but the Scion Rim are sorely needed elsewhere. This is a fairly healthy unit of Scion Rim, but I think it's already a bit too late. A depleted unit of Flag Rim is also moving down here, trying to kill off this section of the Angmar assault, which they might win over here, but everywhere else you can see Angmar are just pouring all over the landscape. Here we can see the Carmel's Chosen fighting hard on the front line still, going up against Guardians of Khan Doom, which they should win that with the support of some infantry units in the background as well. Some Baltros Tribesmen and some Gamp Rim. Rune managing to rally a few more units to the front line, but I don't think it's going to swing the direction of this fight. It might. Scion Rim charging into place as well. This could be a pretty key moment, but unfortunately I think the Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen... No. Oh, that's a shame. I think Inarius lost his bottle. Because that shot would have gone off, I think. But I think Inarius, he saw them coming and he tried to retreat at the last minute. But all that really meant is the shot got cancelled. That's a shame. Because that would have done a decent amount of damage to Hammer Guard. It wouldn't have killed them. It wouldn't have killed enough of them to change the outcome of that fight. But still. You can see there the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. Yeah, so their nafts don't kill instantly. But they will still do a decent amount of damage. Meanwhile over here, a combination of the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard, the 2 strongest Angmar units as far as standard infantry goes, doing some damage. I really like the Witch Realm Blackguard unit, made in the Witch King's image. Blackwatch Legion still moving. I mean, Rune are not giving up without a fight here, certainly giving as good as they get. These Blackwatch Legion pushed a little bit too far into the backfield, and now they're going to be skewered to death by these Loke Scion Rim. There's still some trolls just hounding the Runic Skirmishers. You can see the Runic Skirmishers are just so desperately trying. to get into a position where they can use their ammunition that they have left, but they're just being chased by all sorts of units all the way back. And now the runic skirmishers, they're too far away from the frontline engagement to be useful, to be quite frank. And now the Angmar infantry should be able to go about its grisly work. 2 units of Witch Realm Hammer Guard are over here as well. They're huge rusted warhammers doing the business in melee, as of course are the Witch Realm Blackguard. It's slow going, you know, a lot of the runic units that are left are very good and strong, like Carmel's Chosen, Scion Rim, the sort of units which take a little while to kill, but I do feel as though the writing is on the wall here for Angmar. There's still 4 Barrow-wights, well 5 technically, one's from a separate unit. But yeah, those Barrow-wights are always going to be difficult to deal with. Some Blackwatch Legion actually fighting down here on the riverside, fighting against some Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, ensuring, I think they were out of ammunition anyway, but still, just look at the piles of bodies here. A bit of back and forth in that engagement as well. Looked like Angmar were going to push through earlier, then Rune pushed them back, and then Angmar came forward in their full force. That, I believe, yeah, that's the runic general. Meanwhile, Guardians of Carn blocking the advance of these Scion Rim over here. Rune still, even in this late stage when the battle is decided, still getting caught up on smaller individual units. The gold dragon banners, unfortunately, are not going to be victorious here. The Witch Realm pikemen, in support of the Guardians of Carn again engaging this pocket of runic resistance. And unfortunately, they're going to be recharged by the Witch Realm Hammer Guard as well, which is not going to bode well for them. There are the Barrow-wights in the backfield. And here they come, the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, although Rune are going to try and reposition their engagement, but I don't think it's going to work. Yeah, they're just being utterly surrounded. On all sides, more and more orcs are arriving. What have we got here? More Barrow-wights. Still a decent amount of Scion Rim over there. Those Carmel Shadowbows are still just being smashed by the trolls. Blackguard are moving in. What's this over here? Well, that guy just got bludgeoned. Probably shattered every rib he had. Eastron Crossmen are shaken, yeah, they're not going to last too much longer in melee. The Witch Realm Blackguard may be depleted, but they still cause fear, and the Eastron Crossmen are terrible in melee. 8 Blackguard might actually be enough to kill them, especially with a couple of trolls backing them up. These Witch Realm Blackguard finishing off this last Dragon's Wrath Crossman, and I'm sure they will join in the pursuit. Here come the trolls, and with their higher movement speed, they're just going to pick them off as they run. See what's going on back here. I think still the Shadowbows are trying to shoot, but it's not going to work. They're now shaken as well, so yeah, these trolls exhausted. The Shadowbows have been trying to shoot, ignoring these trolls for a long time, but it just hasn't worked out for them. Rangers, of course, can be so deadly, and I'm sure the Runic Rangers did get a lot of kills when Angmar pushed forward, but unfortunately for them it wasn't enough. This pocket of Runic resistance has been crushed by the Angmar force, and having a look at the potential kills, it is a very close battle, to be fair. Rune fought a good fight, considering this is exactly the sort of battle which Angmar have got the roster to deal with. Rune a little bit more of a jack of all trades. Their skirmishers are very potent, however, and the runic skirmishers were nearly enough to give victory to them here, but Angmar's strength in melee just a little bit too much. Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, still 7 of them left, but there's going to be too many Blackwatch Legionnaires to deal with them. Let's see what's going on over here. So still these strong crossmen are trying to run. I mean, there's really no point from an Inarius perspective. He's not going to be able to escape to the point where he's going to be able to turn around and shoot. He might as well just commit them to melee and watch them break quickly. I mean, these Witch Realm Blackguard are in and amongst them. I think they've been caught now. Yeah, the trolls are here. This is surely going to be enough to finish them off, and there they go. Routing and broken. They certainly won't return either. Catapult crew there. And that's pretty much it for most of the runic resistance on the field, just making sure there's no other engagement. Indeed there is not. So this is the last one. The last unit left standing is going to be that healthy unit of Scion Rim that was in the backfield and kept getting caught on very depleted units. But now they will suffer the same fate as the rest of the runic army. They're going to be surrounded on all sides by some of the scarier Angmar units, including the Blackguard there in the back. Actually, a couple of Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen still alive, although they're going to get shanked as well. They actually routed. So there must be something else then. But we have here down on the riverside this one brave soul trying to take on the Blackwatch Legion, and this does go to show how the Blackwatch Legion are not the most damaging unit in the world. They still haven't been able to finish off these very depleted units over here. And there they are. May as well move up to ×2 speed, to be honest with you. There's still some Carmel's Chosen actually over here in this position where they were engaged previously, so they didn't actually all get finished off. And for the glory of Carmel, they will continue to fight, I'm sure. Bodyguard units like this do tend to be locked morale after all, so they're not going to rout. I do like the Carmel's Chosen and how they look. I like the red sash. The Witcher and Blackguard are coming back now, which will surely be enough to finally put this match to bed. A couple of Trolls of Gundabad as well. Still eager. Yeah, some players are starting to admit defeat now. And Angmar will claim victory, and it's going to be close, within 6% even. Well, technically 4, but I'm not really sure how, like, routed units it works, kind of weird. But yeah, well played to Angmar. Angmar overall did the right thing. I was a little bit worried they weren't going to reinforce their line quickly enough, but they had a good battle plan and they executed it well. Rune, I was worried early on that they were not going to defend their front lines well enough, but again, they corrected that problem. It was not a huge amount of mistakes from either side, to be quite frank. In the end, I just feel as though Angmar, as an army, are a little bit more well-suited to this kind of warfare than Rune are. It's also worth saying as well that the Barrow-wights, you know, their slow speed is not really a problem on a match like this, which is meant to be what holds them back a little bit. In 0.97, when they essentially become half as tanky as they are now, but the same speed as other infantry units, maybe Rune would have won in that outcome, because then the runic skirmishers would have been able to kill off those Barrow-wights far more quickly, and Angmar would not have been able to rely on them quite as much as they did here. Because certainly I would say the Barrow-wights were the MVPs. They really helped to grind down the runic front line, and then when the hammer blow came from Angmar, Rune just didn't have enough strength left to stand up to them. There's still the runic general in there, and there he goes, surrounded by all of those orcs, and that is going to be the end. Very well fought from everyone, and I'm glad that I was sent this one. I think it's, again, I'm sure it's a separate RP from the one that's running on the official Discord, but at least that's what I think is the case. Anyway, pretty even sets of kills all round actually. Lawmaster Eothad getting the fewest, and that's perhaps because he was the one that just sort of sent with his Barrow-wights and they didn't get too many kills perhaps. Rune getting, yeah, very, very even spread actually. Everyone except Eothad actually within 100 kills of one another. Anyway, we will have a look and see what did the damage for Angmar, and I would imagine Barrow-wights doing okay. They get a lot of kills throughout a battle, not because they're strong in melee, but simply because they last so long in melee, they just accrue kills naturally. The Witcher unit's doing a decent amount there. The Snaga Archer's doing okay as well, getting a lot of kills on stuff like Gampbrim. You know, a lot of the runic skirmishers had their attention focused on the infantry, so the Angmar Archers, as weak as they may be, were still able to get some kills on units without really being shot in return too much. Some units were, but some weren't. But the Ballista getting the most kills for Aguilar, and that doesn't surprise me because he got some very nice shots. He positioned it very well, and that's good use of the Ballista there. Especially seeing as most of the time people bring a Ballista with the expectation it's going to be used against other siege equipment. Here, though, he used it well against the actual army. Eothad's army, the Catapult did very, very well. The Trolls of Gundabad actually got slightly more, so when the big assault happened, they got into the right positions and killed off the right things. They may have been the ones that were killing off those shadow bows, actually. The rest of the Guardians of Kharn only got 4, so yeah, I mean, overall fairly mixed bag, but for the he did his job. The Angmar players all did their jobs. And then finally we have BMK Overlord, and he actually didn't have a unit which broke 200 kills. Actually, no, he did. He had the Catapult, so yeah. Certainly, I think we can glean from that if you're going to defend on a river crossing battle, it's always a good idea to have at least one piece of siege equipment. You know, and I personally would go for a Ballista there. You know, especially if you want to be a little bit more defensive. You know, a Ballista is a good idea just because it prevents the enemy from using a Catapult to really soften up your defensive position. And also, of course, the Ballista can still be used aggressively, as we saw Aguilar do here. So yeah, that would be what I would suggest Rune. If Rune did have a piece of siege equipment, if they had a ballista of their own that they could use to snipe out those catapults, the battle was close enough to the point where they could have won this, honestly. Very, very fine margins indeed. Because other than that, I don't think there was much wrong with the two compositions. Angmar were always going to invest more in their infantry, which they did. Rune were always going to invest more in their skirmishers, because Rune can't really go brute force for brute force, blow for blow with Angmar in that sort of battle, but with their skirmishers they can certainly help out. Maybe a unit of cavalry would have helped out. If Angmar do breach the floodgates, a unit of good cavalry like the Dragon's Wrath Warlords, for example, multiple HP Lancers could have been a useful thing to have on hand, but they are quite expensive and that would take away from other aspects of your army. So yeah, big thank you to Aethad and to BMK Overlord, because I think both of them were going to send this to me, but in the end Aethad had it handled, so big thank you to both of them. I do not know whose RP it is. It might be BMK's. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, big thank you to the battle. Hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me, whatever is next.